At my mother's 66th birthday dinner, her husband opened every card she received, took the cash, and handed her a $20 bill. "That's your spending money until Friday," Victor said, sliding it across the white tablecloth as if he were tipping a coat check attendant. There were 23 people in the glass conservatory of a hotel overlooking the Mississippi River, former teachers, neighbors, women from Mom's literacy group, and 4 relatives who had driven through January snow to be there. They had watched Victor Ames tear open the envelopes, flatten the bills into a neat stack, and lock $740 inside his leather briefcase. My mother, Evelyn Hart, stared at the $20. Then she smiled at the room and said, "Well, I suppose dessert is on me." The laugh that followed was thin and embarrassed. I was sitting directly across from her. I was 44, old enough to recognize humiliation and still young enough to feel an immediate urge to stop it with force. Victor believed I reviewed purchasing contracts for a hospital system in Minneapolis. That was true. What he did not know was that before I moved into compliance work, I had spent 10 years with IRS criminal investigation tracing money through nominee accounts, altered returns, and businesses that existed only on paper. I had learned that the most dangerous fraud rarely began with a ski mask. It began with a person saying, "Trust me, I'll handle the details." I had never told Victor much about that part of my life. My mother's marriage was not a case, and I had no intention of treating it like one. Until he put her birthday money in his briefcase. "Give it back," I said. Victor rested one hand on the case. He was 69, silver-haired, broad-shouldered, and practiced at appearing reasonable. He had spent 30 years selling commercial real estate, which meant he could make a threat sound like a market update. "Dana, your mother and I have a budget." Those were gifts to her. And married couples decide together how gifts are used. Evelyn has had trouble keeping track lately. I am protecting her from another impulsive week. Mom's best friend, Lois Chen, lowered her fork. Around the table, several people suddenly found the river more interesting than us. "What happened last week?" I asked. Victor smiled without showing his teeth. "She knows." Mom pressed the $20 beneath her palm. "Dana, please. Not tonight." Victor leaned over and kissed the top of her head. To everyone else, it looked affectionate. From where I sat, I could see his fingers settle on her shoulder and stay there. "See," he said. "She doesn't want a scene." He had answered for her twice in less than 1 minute. I stood. "Mom, walk with me to the lobby." "She hasn't cut the cake," Victor said. I asked Mom. His hand tightened. Mom looked at it, then at me. She eased her chair backward. "I'll be right back," she said. The lobby smelled of cedar garlands and burnt coffee. Snow pressed against the tall windows and soft white sheets. I led Mom past the front desk to a quiet hallway near the conference rooms. She kept looking over my shoulder. "Did Victor take your birthday money last year?" "We didn't have a big dinner last year." "That wasn't my question." She rubbed the edge of the $20 between her fingers. "He puts cash in the household account. Can you access that account?" "Of course I can." "How much is in it?" The color rose in her face. "I don't check every day." "How would you check right now?" Her eyes moved toward the conservatory doors. "Victor changed the passwords after somebody tried to hack us. He says it's safer if only one device is authorized." "His device?" She nodded. I waited. Silence had been useful in interrogation rooms, but it was harder with someone whose hands had packed my lunches and buttoned my winter coat. "What was the impulsive purchase?" I asked. Mom looked down at the patterned carpet. "My heart medicine." She had atrial fibrillation. Her cardiologist had recently changed one prescription, and the 90-day refill cost $311 after insurance. "Did you pick it up?" The card was declined. Victor said the pharmacy could wait until the new budget cycle. "I have 4 pills left." The hotel hallway seemed to narrow around us. My father had left Mom a paid-off brick house in Red Wing, a Minnesota teacher's pension, life insurance, and savings they had built across 39 years of marriage. When she married Victor, she had no mortgage, no consumer debt, and enough monthly income to live without asking anyone for $20. "I'm paying for the prescription tonight," I said. "He'll see the pharmacy alert. Then I will pick it up in Minneapolis." "Don't tell him," I asked. "How much money can you reach without Victor knowing?" Her breath caught. "Why would I need money he doesn't know about?" "Because you're hiding medication from your husband." She closed her eyes. "I don't know." Those 3 words frightened me more than the briefcase. I asked her to spend the weekend at my apartment. She said she would see whether Victor had made plans. I reminded her she did not need permission to visit her daughter. "I know," she said, "too fast." When we returned, Victor had moved my chair away from Mom's. He was telling the table that grief had made her vulnerable to online scams. "Evelyn was always brilliant with books," he said, "but numbers make her anxious now. That's why marriage is a partnership. Mom had managed a middle school library budget for 27 years. She had negotiated vendor contracts, reconciled grant funds, and stretched $9,000 until every child had something new to read. Yet 3 people nodded as if Victor had described a charming weakness. Lois met my eyes. Her expression was not surprise. It was recognition. After cake, Victor announced that the roads were getting worse. He collected Mom's coat, her purse, and the briefcase. Outside, he guided her toward a pearl gray Lincoln Navigator. "Where's Mom's Honda?" I asked. Mom stopped walking. Victor opened the passenger door. "We sold it. 2 vehicles were wasteful. She still volunteers 3 mornings a week." "Not anymore. Driving made her nervous." "Mom, did driving make you nervous?" Victor chuckled. "This is exactly what I mean. You interrogate her until she doubts herself. You should come down more often, Dana. Then ordinary decisions wouldn't shock you." It was bait. If I defended how often I visited, he could make the conversation about me. I looked at Mom instead. "I'll call you tomorrow." Victor handed her into the SUV. "We'll be busy." As they pulled away, Mom pressed her palm against the passenger window. It looked like a wave until I noticed she never moved it. I drove back to Minneapolis through heavy snow and opened a legal pad at 1:18 a.m. Good investigators do not begin with conclusions. They begin with dates. Dad died 4 years earlier after a short battle with pancreatic cancer. Mom met Victor 18 months later at a Literacy Foundation fundraiser. He sponsored a table, remembered every volunteer's name, and offered to replace a broken handrail at Mom's house. He brought groceries during a blizzard. He listened when she talked about Dad without becoming jealous of a dead man. They married 11 months after meeting. Within 3 months, Victor combined their phone plans. Within 5, Mom stopped leading the Tuesday adult reading class. Within 7, she dropped out of her book club. Her Honda disappeared in month 9. Now, in month 13, she could not refill medication or open her own bank account. Each event had a reasonable explanation. Together, they formed a line. I called Lois the next morning. "I wondered how long it would take," she said. "How long it would take for what?" "For Evelyn to let you see." Lois told me Victor had emailed the Literacy Center 6 weeks earlier and said Mom's cardiologist wanted her to avoid responsibility. He had canceled her classes and returned 2 boxes of donated books. When Lois called, Victor answered Mom's phone and said she was sleeping. The next day, Mom left a voicemail saying she had never asked to quit. 10 minutes later, she called again and said she had been mistaken. "She sounded like someone was in the room," Lois said. "Why didn't you call me?" "Because she begged me not to. I thought honoring her choice meant staying quiet. I see now that fear may have been making the choice." "Did Victor ever ask about her finances?" Lois was silent long enough that I heard her wall clock strike 9. "At the wedding he asked whether Paul's life insurance had paid off the house. I corrected him and said the house had been paid off for years. Then he wanted to know whether Evelyn planned to put him on the deed. I told myself real estate men talk about property. I wrote down her exact words and asked her not to contact Victor." Mom did not answer my calls that day. At 7:40 the next morning, an email arrived from an address I did not recognize. Thursday. 10:30, Eastside Community Center. Craft Room B. Come alone. Do not text me. The message ended with Mom's old library sign-off, "Keep turning pages." I arrived 30 minutes early and parked behind a snowplow. Craft Room B had 2 doors, frosted windows, and a long table stained with tempera paint. Lois brought Mom through the service hallway. Mom carried a canvas grocery bag and wore no makeup. She looked as if she had not slept. "How did you send the email?" I asked. "Lois has an old tablet Victor doesn't know about. My phone tells him whenever I leave the house." "Location sharing?" "More than that. The family app sends an alert if I leave what he calls my safe zone. Yesterday he asked why I spent 12 minutes at the mailbox." She tried to laugh. Neither Lois nor I joined her. Inside the grocery bag were copies of a revocable trust amendment, a warranty deed, a cash-out refinance application, and a document naming Victor as agent over banking, real estate, and digital accounts. "He calls it an aging plan," Mom said. "He wants us to sign at a mobile notary appointment Saturday." The refinance request was for $238,000 against the house Dad had paid off. What did he say the money was for? "A new roof and medical reserves. He told me the lender required a larger approval amount, but we would only draw what we needed. The roof was replaced 6 years ago." "I know." When I said that, he told me we had discussed foundation repairs. "Had you?" "No." Then he asked whether I remembered the basement inspection. "There was no inspection. At least I don't think there was." She reached into the bag and removed a spiral notebook. Each page listed an object she had supposedly misplaced: keys in the freezer, her reading glasses inside a planter, a tax file behind the washing machine, the television remote in a box of Christmas ornaments. He keeps finding things in places I would never put them, she said. Then he tells people I'm declining. Last Sunday he asked 2 friends to watch me repeat a story. He had asked me to tell it again. Has he arranged a medical evaluation? He says he has. A place called ClearPath Cognitive Wellness. He told our pastor I may not be competent to sign legal papers, but he keeps bringing me papers to sign. How can both things be true? They could not, unless competence mattered only when Mom said no. Have you signed any version of these documents? No. Anything else lately? She looked at Lois. Tax authorizations. Insurance updates. A form to move my pension deposit. Victor puts colored tabs on the pages. If I read too long, he says I'm getting overwhelmed. Sometimes he flips directly to the signature line. Do you have copies? Not all of them. I photographed every page, front and back, and returned the stack in the same order. Taking the documents could warn Victor before Mom had a safe plan. Do you want to leave today? I asked. Mom stared at the little paper cuts in the craft table. I want my own life back. That isn't the same question. No. I can't leave today. I don't know where my pension goes. I don't know whether Victor already borrowed against the house. He keeps my passport in his office, and he says if I walk out, he'll ask a judge to appoint him to manage me. Has he threatened to hurt you? Not the way you mean. Tell me the way you mean. Her voice dropped. He stands in doorways. He takes my keys when he is angry. Once he locked the garage from his phone while I was inside. He said it was an accident. Lois put a hand over her mouth. Do you have somewhere nearby you can go? Lois's basement. The side door has a keypad. Can Victor track Lois? No. Keep medication, shoes, copies of identification, and a coat there. Do not put anything in your car or purse that he checks. Mom nodded, then looked at me with an expression I had not seen since Dad died. Are you ashamed of me? For what? For marrying him. For not stopping this sooner. I moved my chair beside hers. You were lonely. He studied what safety looked like and wore it like a uniform. The shame belongs to the person who weaponized your trust. Her eyes filled, but the tears did not fall. Your father never made me feel stupid for asking where money went. Then we start with the money. After that, we make every decision yours. The next morning I called Marisol Vega, a St. Paul attorney who handled elder exploitation and complex divorces. I knew her from a non-profit board, not from my federal work. I paid her consultation fee and gave no opinion about what Mom should do. Marisol insisted on meeting Mom alone first. For 52 minutes, I sat in the lobby beneath a painting of Lake Superior and fought the urge to build a plan without the person who had to live inside it. My old work had rewarded control. Loving my mother required something harder, respecting her right to choose even when I was frightened by the risk. When Marisol's door opened, Mom carried a yellow legal pad covered in her own handwriting. I'm filing for divorce, she said. And I want Victor prevented from touching the house. Marisol explained the path without promising a clean victory. They would document Mom's premarital ownership, recover statements she had a right to obtain, dispute unauthorized credit, and seek temporary restraints on transfers or new liens. Mom would open a separate account for income legally hers only after they verified how to redirect it. She would not drain joint accounts, hide property, threaten Victor with criminal charges, or take business records she had no right to possess. The safest strategy is usually the least theatrical, Marisol said. Every step should be lawful, documented, and boring enough to explain in 2 sentences. She studied the proposed documents. The deed gives Victor a present ownership interest. The trust amendment makes him successor trustee with broad discretion. The agency document gives him digital access. And this refinance is not a reserve. It is a cash-out loan with closing costs built in. Mom gripped the arm of her chair. He said nothing had been submitted. Then our first question is whether the lender agrees. At Lois's house, Mom recovered an old email account using a backup code stored in a recipe book. There were 5,806 unread messages. We searched only obvious lender terms and found an automated notice from Prairie Union Bank dated 16 days earlier. Thank you for completing your residential refinance application. Mom whispered, I didn't complete anything. A second email said the file had passed preliminary review. A third confirmed receipt of electronic consent, an income statement, and an owner occupancy affidavit. The sent folder contained a PDF called Evelyn_final. Mom's signature appeared at the bottom of 7 pages. It looked accurate until I enlarged it and saw the exact same tiny ink break in every copy. Real signatures vary. Images repeat. The e-sign certificate listed a verification code sent to a phone ending in 4419. Mom's number ended in 0186. Victor's ended in 4419. The witness declaration had been signed by Grant Holloway, Victor's business partner, who had watched Victor take Mom's birthday money and had said nothing. Mom stared at the screen, then pressed 2 fingers to her pulse. "That isn't a misunderstanding," she said. "No. He used his own phone." "Yes." She closed the laptop carefully. "Then I leave today." Prairie Union's fraud unit froze the application while we were still at Lois's dining table. Marisol introduced herself, explained that Mom disputed both the submission and the signatures, and put Mom on the call. The bank representative asked security questions. Victor had changed 2 of the answers, but Mom knew enough to prove her identity and request an in-person review. She stated her name, the property address, and the exact boundary of her consent. "I did not apply for this loan," she said. "I do not authorize my husband to sign for me. I do not consent to any mortgage, lien, or transfer involving my house." The representative placed an identity theft alert on the file and preserved its device records. The application was not yet funded. We had stopped the immediate threat, not proved who created it. Mom left Victor's house at 4:35 that afternoon while he attended a Chamber of Commerce dinner in Rochester. Marisol had given us a written list of personal property Mom could take without turning the move into a dispute. Lois, a neighbor named Arthur Bell, and I went with her. Mom packed medication, winter clothes, toiletries, personal jewelry, her birth certificate, and photographs that predated the marriage. She left furniture, electronics, art, and anything Victor might call joint property. Her passport was not in the fireproof box where she kept it. "He asked for it when he said we might go to Vancouver," she said. "That was 8 months ago." I photographed the open box and the labeled folder that should have contained it. In Dad's old study, every family photograph had been removed from the built-in shelves. Victor had replaced them with architectural renderings of small cottages arranged around a lake. A brass plaque beneath the central drawing read Cedar Vale Senior Cottages, Independence, Dignity, Home. The irony made my stomach turn. Mom found Dad's photographs stacked face down in a desk drawer. The walnut frame from their 30th anniversary had been cracked at one corner. "What happened?" I asked. Victor swept it off the desk when I asked why my pension deposit had changed. "Was he near you?" "He didn't touch me." Arthur, standing in the doorway, said quietly, "Evelyn, that doesn't make it safe." Mom looked at the broken frame. For months, she had been measuring danger by whether Victor's hand landed on her body. Now she wrapped the photograph in a sweater and placed it in her suitcase. Victor called before we crossed the city limits. He called 28 times during the drive to Minneapolis. His messages moved through identities as quickly as weather. Worried husband, please tell me where you are. I am terrified. Reasonable partner, we can discuss the accounts when you've calmed down. Injured victim, after everything I did for you, this is how you repay me. Threatened authority, taking property and medication proves you cannot manage safely. Accuser, Dana has wanted your house since Paul died. Mom forwarded everything to Marisol and replied once with language Marisol approved, I am safe. Communicate through counsel. Do not come to Dana's home. Victor sent one final message. You have just confirmed every concern I documented. Mom read it twice. He was waiting for me to leave, she said. The divorce petition and motion to preserve property were filed the next morning. Victor was served at his office 2 days later. Temporary restraints prevented either party from transferring real estate, opening new joint debt, moving retirement funds, or disposing of material property outside ordinary expenses. By then, Victor had reached half of Red Wing. He never wrote that I kidnapped Mom. He said she had been removed from her support system by a daughter with an unhealthy fixation on financial control. He called her pastor, her former principal, the literacy center director, and 3 cousins. He posted their wedding photograph beside a paragraph about loving someone through cognitive decline. The post received 143 sympathetic reactions. Mom sat at my kitchen counter scrolling through the comments. Each sentence seemed to make her smaller. I should answer, she said. They're praying for him. You can answer if you want. What do you hope it changes? I want them to know I'm not confused. Will a public argument prove that, or give him more material to reinterpret? She looked at me sharply. Are you telling me what to do now? The question stung because she was right to ask it. No. I'm asking what result you want. If you want to post, I'll help you preserve a copy first. If you want the account off your phone, I'll help with that. If you want to leave it alone tonight, that's also yours. Mom studied Victor's smiling wedding photograph for another minute. Save it for Marisol. Then block him. That decision belonged to her. The following week, Mom completed a capacity evaluation with Dr. Nia Okafor, a geriatric psychiatrist unaffiliated with either lawyer. I waited in the building lobby. The evaluation covered memory, attention, reasoning, medication, financial concepts, coercion, and whether Mom understood the consequences of divorce. Dr. Okafor found no evidence of cognitive impairment. She noted anxiety consistent with prolonged stress, but Mom understood her assets, legal choices, and medical needs. Mom cried when she read the report. "I knew I wasn't losing my mind," she said. "Why does seeing it on paper feel like getting something back?" Because he turned his opinion into a fog. Facts give the room edges again. Victor responded through his attorney with a 2-page cognitive summary carrying the logo of North Shore Family Medicine. It said Mom showed disorientation, repeated questions, poor financial judgment, and a need for supervised decision-making. The date was 5 weeks before her birthday. Mom recognized the clinic but not the appointment. "That's Dr. Patel's office. I had my flu shot there in October. I haven't been back." The document included a paragraph that sounded clinical and a signature that looked genuine. Marisol refused to call it fake until the records were obtained. The clinic's authenticated chart told a different story. Victor had sent a message through Mom's portal reporting that she repeated stories and misplaced items. Dr. Patel's nurse replied that family concerns should be discussed at a scheduled visit and that no conclusion could be made without assessing the patient. There had been no visit. Someone had copied the clinic letterhead and Dr. Patel's electronic signature from an ordinary medication message. The altered summary omitted every reference to Victor as the source of the allegations and changed "cannot assess" to "assessment indicates." The PDF's creator field listed VAM's laptop. That discovery changed the emotional shape of the case. Victor was not merely calling Mom forgetful when she resisted him. He was manufacturing a record and using the appearance of medicine to make coercion sound like care. I wanted to confront him. Instead, I went to the basement gym in my building and hit a rowing machine until the digital screen blurred. Anger can power an investigation, but it should never steer one. When I returned upstairs, Mom had covered my dining table with index cards. Each card described a time Victor said she had forgotten something. On the back, she wrote what she had questioned immediately before it. "Where is the $6,000 transfer? Keys found in freezer. Why did the pension deposit shrink? Reading glasses found in garage. Why was my Honda listed online? Victor told Lois I missed a meeting. I don't want to sign a deed." Victor called Pastor Hale about memory decline. "I wanted to see whether the timing was real," Mom said. "It is. He trained me to treat resistance as a symptom." There was no fear in her voice. Only anger. Financial discovery took 7 weeks. Victor requested extensions, produced incomplete statements, and claimed the desktop in his home office had been corrupted during a software update. Marisol subpoenaed banks, the vehicle dealer, pension records, and the refinance lender rather than debating him. The records arrived in pieces. Mom's Honda CR-V had sold for $19,850. Victor told her the dealer paid only $15,000 after fees and that the money covered taxes. The dealer had wired the full amount to Cedar Vale Development Group, LLC. That company also received 14 transfers from Mom's pension and joint accounts totaling $92,460. Mom had never knowingly invested in it. Public records showed Victor and Grant Holloway had spent 5 years trying to convert a closed lakeside resort near Wabasha into 34 high-end senior cottages. The project was marketed with phrases like independent living and age with dignity. It had never opened. Wetland permits were delayed, 3 buildings failed inspection, and the construction lender had sued over a personal guarantee. The company needed $241,000 within 30 days to prevent the lender from taking the land. The refinance against Mom's house was for $238,000 before fees. Victor had not been simplifying household finances. He had been feeding Mom's security into a failing development one transfer at a time while preparing her house to cover the final gap. Mom sat in Marisol's conference room with the bank chart in front of her. Did he marry me for the house? No bank record could answer that completely. The house mattered to his plan, I said. The transfers show that. They don't tell us whether every dinner, every joke, or every kind moment was false. I wish they did. I understood. Total fraud would have been easier to hate than a man capable of bringing soup to a grieving widow and later using her trust to steal from her. Victor offered mediation. The proposal allowed Mom to return home if she dismissed the divorce, attended a memory program he selected, and signed a household management agreement. She would receive a debit card capped at $800 a month. Victor would cancel the refinance, for the present, and retain authority to manage taxes, insurance, and repairs. Mom read the proposal without shaking. He is offering me an allowance from my own pension. Yes, Marisol said. And he still wants the house later. The wording leaves that door open. Mom wrote the rejection herself. It was 5 sentences long and contained no accusation. The pressure moved into public spaces. Victor sent flowers to my office with a card addressed to Mom. Come home before Dana ruins what remains. He called the building manager and claimed Mom was a vulnerable adult being isolated. He appeared at the Literacy Center's winter fundraiser after learning Mom planned to attend with Lois. I went too but stayed across the room. The fundraiser filled an old railroad depot with folding chairs, donated books, and paper cups of cocoa. Victor waited until a local reporter arrived to photograph the volunteers. Then he walked toward Mom carrying her red winter coat as if he had come to rescue her from bad weather. "Evelyn," he said loudly, "please let me take you home. Dana has turned a marital misunderstanding into a public spectacle." The room went quiet in uneven waves. Mom's former principal stepped between them. "Victor, this isn't appropriate. My wife is vulnerable. I'm asking for compassion." He turned toward the reporter before he looked back at Mom. "She has been evaluated for serious memory problems. Her daughter is exploiting that fear." Every instinct I had told me to cross the room and dismantle him with dates, accounts, and document metadata. I did not move. Mom had spent a year being spoken for. Defending her by taking her voice would repeat the shape of the injury. She walked around the principal. "Victor, who evaluated me?" His expression remained tender. "This isn't the place." "You made it the place." "Which doctor evaluated me?" "We have medical documentation." "You altered a portal message from a doctor who never examined me." "I chose my own specialist." "She found no impairment." "I chose my own lawyer." "I filed my own petition." "Dana did not make those decisions." The reporter lowered her camera. Victor's jaw tightened. "You don't understand the documents Dana put in front of you." Mom removed a folded sheet from her purse, but she did not wave it at the room. She handed it to the principal beside her. "That is my independent evaluation. If you tell anyone else I am incompetent, you may say it under oath." Victor stepped closer. "You have no idea what you're risking." Mom lifted her chin. "For the first time since I married you, I know what I am protecting." Lois took Mom's arm, and they walked away together. In the parking lot, Mom leaned against a brick wall and shook so hard I could hear her coat zipper tapping. "I thought my mouth would stop working," she said. "It didn't." "No. It didn't." She started laughing, not because anything was funny, but because terror sometimes leaves the body through the nearest open door. That night Victor's lawyer threatened a defamation claim and demanded the return of confidential development records. The phrase was revealing. If the transfers were normal marital spending, why did asking about them expose confidential business information? Marisol requested targeted discovery of Cedar Vale, the refinance application, and communications between Victor and Grant. Victor objected. The judge ordered production. The process that followed was slow enough to feel cruel. I returned to work. Mom began therapy with a counselor who specialized in coercive control. Bank lawyers preserved device logs. Cedar Vale produced boxes of invoices. Victor postponed depositions twice. Real accountability rarely arrives to dramatic music. It arrives through deadlines, certified mail, and people whose calendars are already full. Some mornings Mom was certain she had done the right thing. On others she missed the man who cooked mushroom soup during the blizzard and wondered whether accepting an allowance would be easier than fighting. "Missing the tenderness does not make the control tender," her counselor told her. Mom wrote that sentence on an index card and taped it beside my coffee machine. The lender's electronic audit trail arrived in March. The refinance application was created on Victor's office computer. Mom's signature image had been clipped from a pension beneficiary form she signed 3 years earlier. The verification code went to Victor's phone. Grant approved the witness declaration from his own device 6 minutes later. Victor claimed Mom sat beside him and authorized everything, then forgot. That story might have created enough uncertainty if not for one detail he had overlooked. At the exact time the e-signature was submitted, Mom was leading a 2-hour reading workshop at the Eastside Community Center. The class had moved online during a snow emergency, and Mom taught from the center's media room because Victor said their home internet was unreliable. The session had been recorded for 19 adult learners. Mom remained visible on screen from 1:02 p.m. until 3:11 p.m., answering questions and reading passages aloud. The application was signed at 2:16 p.m. Victor's home doorbell camera showed that he and Grant entered the house at 1:47 p.m. Victor had later deleted the clip from the app, but the cloud provider preserved it after the subpoena. The evidence did more than contradict his story. It placed both men inside the house with the source document, the receiving phone, and the computer while Mom was 4 miles away teaching people how to read contracts. Grant's attorney changed position within 48 hours. Grant had previously claimed he believed Mom authorized the application. Now he said Victor assured him the signature was lawful and that Mom would confirm it later. He produced his entire message history after learning Victor intended to blame him for creating the file. Most of the messages were ordinary development problems, plumbing bids, permit delays, angry lenders. Then Marisol found a conversation dated 6 weeks before Mom and Victor's wedding. Grant had sent Victor a link to Dad's obituary. Beneath it he wrote, "Paid off house confirmed. Are you sure she will leverage it?" Victor answered, "Not while she's still sentimental. Give me 8 months to bring the pension, cards, and mail under one roof. Once she gets used to asking, the house becomes practical." Grant asked, "And if she keeps saying no?" Victor replied, "Then no becomes proof she can't understand what needs doing." Mom read the message in Marisol's office. She did not cry. She walked to the wastebasket and was sick. I held her hair away from her face while Marisol brought water. When Mom finally stood, she looked at the printed messages again. "I kept asking when he changed," she said. There was no change. There was only the moment he stopped waiting. I wanted to tell her some part of the marriage had been real. The messages did not give me permission to offer that comfort. Marisol filed the authenticated thread under seal and sent it to the bank's counsel. She warned us not to use possible criminal consequences as leverage. "We do not say, 'Give Evelyn the house or we report you,'" she said. "The bank already has reporting duties. Investigators decide what they investigate. Our settlement stands on the property records, the transfers, and the divorce law. We keep those lanes separate." Victor's attorney withdrew 5 days later. His replacement requested emergency mediation and made a new offer. Victor would disclaim any interest in the house if Mom waived reimbursement for the transferred funds, paid half of Cedar Vale's remaining tax debt, and signed a non-disparagement clause broad enough to block her from sharing documents with outside parties. Marisol struck the clause and read, "No settlement will prevent lawful cooperation with a lender, regulator, or investigator." The traceable loss now totaled $118,730, including the Honda proceeds, pension transfers, credit card charges, and payments disguised as home maintenance. Mom studied the number. "If I insist on all of it, this could take another year." "Yes," Marisol said. "You could spend more and recover less. Victor may have assets we can reach, but Cedar Vale is collapsing. A perfect moral result is not the same as a collectible legal result. My job is to show you the choices without pretending any of them erase what happened." Mom turned to me. "What would you do?" It was the question I had dreaded. "Do you want the answer from your daughter or from the person who used to investigate money?" "Both. The investigator would calculate proof, legal fees, time, collection risk, and the value of certainty. Your daughter wants him to put $118,730 on this table, open your birthday cards in front of every person who watched him take them, and apologize until the words mean something. Only the first answer belongs in the legal decision. Neither answer gets to replace yours." Mom smiled weakly. "I raised an annoyingly ethical woman." "You did." She chose mediation, but she did not choose surrender. The session took place in a conference suite near the Goodhue County Courthouse. Mom and Victor began in separate rooms while a retired judge carried proposals between them. There was nothing cinematic about the process. The coffee was stale, the carpet was brown, and hours passed while numbers moved by thousands and then hundreds. At 1 p.m., Victor asked to speak to Mom directly. Marisol advised against it unless the mediator and both attorneys remained in the room. Mom agreed under those conditions. She also asked me to stay. Victor stood when we entered. He looked thinner, but his navy suit was immaculate. Exhaustion had weakened his presentation, not his belief that presentation could still save him. "I asked to speak to my wife," he said. Mom sat across from him. "Dana stays because I asked her to." Victor's lawyer touched his arm, but he pulled away. "Evelyn, Grant is rewriting history to save himself. Dana has treated our marriage like a tax raid. Marisol has turned every private compromise into evidence of malice." "How did you know about Dana's old work?" Mom asked. Victor paused. "I know she worked for the government." He had made a mistake. For months, he told people I was a hospital purchasing clerk who invented expertise. Now he admitted knowing more. "When did you learn that?" Mom asked. "Before the wedding. I looked into the family I was joining. Any responsible man would. My IRS career was not secret, but specific assignments were. A basic search would show my title, public service dates, and 2 awards. Victor had known enough to underestimate me deliberately instead of accidentally. He turned toward me. "You let me think you compared supply prices." "I do compare supply prices. You followed my money from the day we met. I started after you took $740 from Mom at her birthday dinner and called $20 an allowance. Before that, you were her choice, and I respected it. You set me up. Your messages were written before the wedding. Your computer built the loan file. Your phone accepted the code. Your setup did not need me." The mediator raised one hand. "We are not conducting an examination. We are deciding whether the marriage can be resolved. Mom had watched Victor without blinking. Then she placed both palms flat on the table. Did you ever love me? The question had no dollar value. No lawyer interrupted. Victor looked past her toward the window. I cared for you. I still do. But love is not childish sentiment. Cedar Vale would have provided security for both of us. The refinancing was temporary. Once the cottages opened, the debt could have been paid down. You took my pension without telling me. I moved marital funds into a marital opportunity. You sold my car. We agreed to reduce expenses. You altered a medical message. I was trying to get doctors to take your symptoms seriously. You copied my signature. You had signed similar authorizations. You told Grant before our wedding that you would make my refusal look like proof I was incompetent. That was business frustration. Grant took it out of context. Each answer changed the label while preserving the act. Mom listened until he had nothing left but vocabulary. You call theft an investment, she said. You call surveillance safety. You call humiliation budgeting. You call a lie a medical concern because you think gentle words clean dirty actions. I don't need your definitions anymore. I need my home, my income, and my name separated from yours. Victor's face changed. Without me, you would still be alone in Paul's house, arranging books for adults who cannot read. Mom flinched. Then she opened the folder in front of her and removed Dad's photograph in its repaired walnut frame. I was lonely, she said. Loneliness was never an invitation to own me. And those adults have more courage than you will ever understand. They ask for help without turning help into control. She stood. We can finish through the mediator. Victor looked at me with open hatred. You think you won because you knew where to look? No, I said. You lost when she stopped asking you what was real. That was the last direct sentence I ever gave him. The settlement required another 8 hours. Victor relinquished all present and future claims to the house. Mom kept her pension, separate savings, and personal property. He assumed the Cedar Vale debt and agreed to a financial offset that returned most of the traceable transfers through available retirement funds, his remaining brokerage account, and his share of marital property. The Honda proceeds were included. He paid the legal expenses caused by delayed discovery. Mom did not recover every dollar. She recovered enough to remain secure, and she signed nothing that limited truthful cooperation with lawful investigations. When the final papers arrived, Marisol placed them in front of Mom without arrows pointing to the signature lines. Take as long as you need. Mom read every page. She asked 8 questions. She found a transposed account number, requested a correction, and read that page again. Then she signed. Victor left through a side hallway. In the elevator, Mom watched the floor numbers light one at a time. I thought victory would feel louder, she said. What does it feel like? Like I haven't slept for a year. And like I should be embarrassed that so many people had to help me do things I once did alone. Independence does not mean nobody helps you. It means help never takes away your choice. She looked at me. Did your investigations teach you that? No. You did. I just understood it late. The divorce decree was entered 7 weeks later. Cedar Vale's lender took the property and sold it to a non-profit housing organization. The new owners abandoned the luxury model and completed 18 modest rental units with independent resident advocates and clear financial safety policies. Mom laughed when she read the announcement. The land finally became what Victor advertised, she said. Just without Victor. Grant authenticated the messages and admitted approving the witness declaration without seeing Mom sign. His cooperation mattered, but self-preservation did not make him heroic. He had watched the birthday dinner, accepted transfers, and verified a document because the project needed money. Truth told late can still be useful without becoming noble. Prairie Union Bank and state investigators continued reviewing the altered medical document, identity misuse, and refinance application. I did not call former colleagues or ask for information we had no right to receive. Months later, Victor entered a plea agreement resolving charges related to attempted financial exploitation and identity theft. The court imposed restitution coordinated with the civil settlement, probation, and restrictions on serving as a fiduciary or handling another person's financial information. His real estate license was suspended. Consequences did not arrive with handcuffs at a dramatic dinner. They arrived through license notices, canceled memberships, credit reports, and conference rooms where Victor's polished explanations no longer opened doors. The Literacy Center's director apologized to Mom for accepting Victor's cancellation email without speaking to her. Next time a husband says his wife is too confused to answer, Mom said, ask why he is so determined to answer first. The center invited a local financial abuse advocate to train volunteers. Mom attended the first session from the back row. At the second, she sat on the panel. She did not tell strangers every detail. She talked about passwords, transportation, medication, mail, and how control can hide inside the language of efficiency. She explained that education and a long happy first marriage had not made her immune. The first thing he took was not money, she said. It was my confidence that I had the right to ask where the money went. After the session, 3 women waited to speak privately with the advocate. Mom moved back to the brick house after Victor surrendered possession and the locks were changed. I offered to stay for a week. She allowed 3 nights, then told me to go home. Her passport arrived through counsel in a property box. Tucked inside it was a handwritten list of her security answers: childhood street, first school, favorite teacher, dad's middle name. Victor had collected them during conversations Mom once remembered as intimacy. We changed every recovery answer to something unguessable. Mom froze and used credit, chose a new bank, and met with a fiduciary advisor Marisol recommended. The advisor sat beside her, not across from her, and made Mom control every login. Then Mom shredded Victor's list one line at a time. I used to think privacy inside marriage meant I was hiding something, she said. Privacy is not deception. Access is not love. I know that now. Her first night alone was difficult. At 1:42 a.m., she called because headlights had moved across the ceiling. I'm sorry, she said. Don't apologize. Tell me where you are. The kitchen. What do you see? The green kettle. Paul's photograph. A stack of library books. My keys on the blue tray. What do you hear? The furnace. Snow against the window. My own breathing. We stayed on the phone until the house became a house again instead of a map of possible entrances. Recovery returned through ordinary decisions. Mom bought a used cranberry red Toyota RAV4. The salesman kept asking whether she wanted to call her husband before declining an extended warranty. Only if you have a phone that reaches the afterlife, she said. Then she negotiated $700 off the price and called me from the parking lot, laughing so hard I had to ask her to repeat the story. She returned to the literacy center twice a week. On her first morning, a 52-year-old student named Raina read a full page aloud without stopping. Mom came home exhausted and happier than I had heard her in 2 years. Lois restarted the book club in Mom's living room. At first, everyone avoided Victor's name and offered help Mom did not need. His absence became another guest. At the 3rd meeting, Mom closed the novel in her lap. You may say Victor, she told them. I am divorced, not under a spell. The laughter began carefully, then became real. I returned to my hospital office, where purchasing contracts really did fill most of my days. My supervisor had covered for me without demanding details. When I finally said the case was over, she studied me across the break room. You look relieved. I am. You also look angry. That part is slower. For months, I replayed the birthday dinner. I blamed myself for not asking why Mom stopped volunteering, why Victor answered her phone, why the Honda vanished. Guilt disguised itself as professional review. It promised that if I rebuilt the timeline enough times, I could invent a past in which I had perfect information and prevented every loss. My therapist asked what I would say to another daughter who acted as soon as her mother told the truth. I would say she did what she could with what she knew. Why doesn't that apply to you? I had no answer that survived being spoken aloud. Eventually, I stopped treating Mom's pain like a failed investigation. Victor had hidden the plan because concealment worked. Mom had hidden her fear because shame worked. I had caused neither. Nearly 1 year after the dinner, Mom celebrated her 67th birthday at the literacy center. She asked guests not to bring cash. Anyone who wanted to give something could donate to a fund that paid for transportation and legal consultations for older adults facing financial control. There were no white tablecloths and no locked briefcase. Raina read a birthday message aloud. Lois carried a sheet cake with crooked frosting. Mom wore a cream sweater, silver earrings, and a small leather crossbody bag. Inside were her own phone, her own car keys, and a debit card from an account only she controlled. After the guests left, I helped stack chairs. Do you ever want to date again? I asked. Mom gave me the same look she used when I returned a library book late at 14. You drove 55 miles to ask that? I'm curious. She straightened a pile of workbooks. Maybe. But anyone who enters my life will have to stand beside the life I already have. I am not a vacancy anymore. She had never been a vacancy. She had lived with a man who needed her to feel like one. That evening, we went back to the brick house. Dad's photograph stood on the built-in shelf in clear new glass. Mom's passwords were locked in a small safe she had chosen. Her car keys rested on the blue tray by the door exactly where she had put them. She made tea while I returned books to the shelves. Inside one old volume of poems, I found a bookplate stamped by Dad years earlier, from the home library of Paul and Evelyn Hart. Do you want me to remove his name? I asked. Mom took the book and ran her thumb across the faded ink. No. Victor tried to make loving Paul evidence that I could not move forward. Paul is part of my life. Victor does not get to rewrite that either. She placed the book between a new financial safety guide and the novel her class was reading. Victor thought you were the reason he chose the wrong widow, she said. He thought my old job was the reason. Wasn't it? I considered the transaction charts, the device records, the recorded class, Grant's messages, Marisol's work, Lois's courage, and every skill that helped us see the plan. They mattered. But none of them would have changed Mom's life if she had kept apologizing for wanting her own money. No, I said. He chose wrong when he confused your trust with permission. Mom brought 2 mugs into the living room and sat beside me. For a while, we listened to the furnace and watched snow collect on the windowsill. Strength had not returned with a courtroom speech. It returned as a prescription filled on time, a document read before signing, 8 questions asked without shame, and a woman sleeping alone until solitude felt like freedom instead of punishment. Victor had spent a year teaching my mother to doubt what she remembered. In the end, the fact that saved her was not hidden in a bank file or device log. It was the simplest fact she owned. Before he trained her to ask, she remembered that she had always been allowed to say no.